Hello everyone, it's Leilani Cawthon, and I'm here in Baltimore, super excited. It was raining cats and dogs this morning. Almost no one made it. Everyone was drenched just walking in today. So I've got my friend Jim Corrence. I've known Jim for a long time. Executive Director of Baltimore County Public Schools. I've also got Dr. Kecia Addison, who's a Director of Office of Shared Accountability, Montgomery County Public Schools. This sounds like it's much bigger than we've talked about so far today, so we're going to hear from you on that. And then Dr. Joseph Bostic, who's the assistant principal down in Northwood High School, who has a heart of gold. We already found that out. Okay, so we're going to have a good time together. What I want to start out with is, Learning Council today, we gave a lot of data about what we see the future becoming. You're already probably in the middle of what you already know is a perfect storm. And all three of you are super brilliant. You shared that today. So what's your real big takeaway from what you got today, just being together? Not like all of us didn't know each other. Like I already knew Jim, right? But we didn't know each other. So what's your favorite takeaway? I'm going to start with you, Jim, because I just pointed at you anyway.
I think my favorite takeaway is that there's a palpable air of willingness to adopt new change. I believe education is constantly in a state of flux. We're always moving in a different direction. We're always trying to be responsive to our student body, to the needs of each of our students, individually as well as in groups. And just listening to the group that came together today, there was a lot of conversation around the challenges that we face, but I didn't hear any fatality about it or we've given up this. There's still the desire to move this all ahead. So it's just reaffirming that we're still doing the right work with the right people.
Yeah, sure. Okay, Dr. Addison.
The opportunity to innovate, right? With technology, with where we're heading as a nation and with AI and all those things, that opportunity to innovate, connecting to what Jim said is there. And so how can we do that? How can we do that to support students, especially the newer generation, as it relates to kind of their use of technology and instantaneous need for things?
Yeah. Good. All right. So, Dr. Bostic, what are your thoughts?
Definitely being adaptable. So adapting to what is happening currently in education. Meaning that a lot of our kids are not going to be willing to be in the traditional model that we know of over the last 50 or so years. But students are going to want to connect and be united by different pathways. When you think about college, career, CTE, and any other post-secondary opportunity. And then as Dr. Addison and Jim said, one of the things that we should consider is the innovation piece. So what technology innovation are we infusing in our buildings, our classrooms, and so forth, and at home with the kids too?
Yeah, so one of the precepts we shared earlier today is the fact that we think at Learning Council Research that what is needed is to lean harder on technology in order to elevate human teaching. Okay, now that's counter to what people think. Okay, they think no, take that out, take the phones away. I'm not saying that's totally a bad idea, but I think in some instances it will be. Let's take that out because these kids can't even have good conversations. They're not social. They're having fights at school. It's like we got to get the humanity back in at like the nth degree. And what I'm saying is no. We got to lean harder on technology to carry the logistics, to carry the distribution of test scores in with graphics, and just to really soup up like how teachers know things so that they can be like little SWAT teams and like swoop in and fix whatever kid needs whatever right now this second and move on to the next one. I really think we have to do that. But what are your thoughts? Let's go backwards route this time. Let's go, Dr. Bostic, you first. What is your thought on that?
Oh, that's a very heavy topic, but I think I always, when I'm talking to other leaders in the county, I share that there's a difference between transformational and transactional leaders. So as we're approaching this new phase of the work, we have to be very transformational in what we're doing. Um, I believe that it's important to also acknowledge that it's changing. So regardless of if we can accept it, change is happening. So we have to embrace that change and say, what do we do as practitioners? What does the research tell us so we can take action to make things happen for our kids?
Good. All right.
It's a balance. We have to strike a balance between technology and person. And I do, and I said it earlier, we're going to have to go there anyway. I mean, just like if we think back to what the world looked like, 20, 30 years ago, it doesn't look like it the same. So how do we create that balance? How do we strike that balance? How do we ensure that the students are easily able to accept the balance? It's the adults who need to embrace that change. And so that's part of the learning that needs to happen in terms of, it's the adults. We are the ones who are more rigid in our thinking around embracing technology.
Do you feel that's changing though? Are you getting a mood on that? The adults are getting a little like, yeah, maybe I have to. Is the needle moving at all for you?
I feel like adults are fine with technology from a social perspective, but not from a teaching and learning perspective.
So they're not all in all the way.
I don't think so. I don't know, but you're
Yeah, I get it.
You're 100% accurate. I think Dr. Addison's point about technologies, there are a lot of folks that understand how to use technology for personal use, but when you go to operationalize that into a educational environment, it's a whole different feel. I may be able to use Facebook or Twitter, or I may be able to log into my computer, but what does it take to get a group of human beings to do something productive with that is a whole different skill set that not many folks just walk in. So there's a implicit amount of teaching that we have to do with our educators to show them how to use that tool the best way possible. And I 100% agree that the right tool for the right time doesn't always mean technology. And so you run the risk of skewing one direction too heavily and taking out that element of differentiated instruction and learning where there is an absolute time when a read aloud book for elementary school students is the appropriate thing to do, and then the appropriate time to put them in front of a piece of technology to work on their own. And so there's a whole burgeoning movement when we go to AI and what that's going to mean for the classroom. And in education, we've done exactly what education always does. First, we block it because we're afraid of it, and so I'll run. If you follow through with me in the parallel path, we do the Wikipedia thing. Well, we're going to block it in school. It's going to be the downfall of all education. And then you get some innovator teachers who come through and say, hey, Wikipedia actually is providing some benefit. And then after a certain amount of time, it's a wholesale adoption. And so we validate what we see. And so we're right there with AI right now, but it's going to be this force multiplier. But we also have to be very implicit with our teachers on how to use that. And they need that PD because hoping that they'll just get it isn't going to be the way we're going to go. And so, that's kind of the way I'm seeing technology move forward with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that you're right. That there's a curve there.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I think the market's moving so quickly that the rate of change in education, if you were to have watch it as like a wheel turning, it's not turning fast enough, and it's about to come off. Does it make sense? I know we talked about that earlier. I want you guys to comment on that, but I want the audience to feel free to ask another question too. But let's do that. Do you guys have a question for that? No? Yes? No? Okay.
Mike over there. What does the wheels coming off? What are some of the things that might look like?
Well, AI, what Jim was just saying, AI's coming in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Dr. Bostic talked already about the fact that we need to really up our humanity. We feel like we're in it's not just your school, it's everywhere I go in the country, right? Everyone I talk to, even at the big trade shows, right? There's a sense right now, almost like we all need a hug, right? Everyone, right? Technology's moving really, really fast and AI's coming at us. And there are people out there now saying AI is going to take a lot of teaching jobs. And our survey showed the teachers believe it. They also say, no, won't you just take our job? So there's going to be new jobs too. We're already not ready for the jobs there are, right? We're not moving fast enough.
So,
My main thing is we have a cycle in education where everybody's busy as a beaver all year long, and in the summer they take off, except for the administrators who are working their butts off, right? We're not fast enough for change. So, you want to go first, Kecia?
Well, I'm going to approach it from the work of my office, Shared Accountability Research, right?
Yeah.
And so, to your point in terms of embracing AI, I went to a conference, it was about AI. I was like, that with AI is bad. After the session, I was like, oh, I see the potential for this. To the point where for my team, so when you talk about fast enough, qualitative research takes a lot of time.
Yes.
You
True.
learned how to do it using AI. It's the beginning point though, right? So you don't let it do all of the work for you. And we talked about that earlier, right?
Yeah.
So how do you embrace it? How do you use it accurately and effectively to support what you're doing, but it doesn't take the place of what you're doing? So I think that's the opportunity in terms of the conversations and getting people to understand the value is really how does it supplement, complement what you know how to do. It learns from you. So I think that's the conversation in terms of getting people to understand the value of something like AI in terms of the different education.
Well, yeah, but at your level and yours, you got Bostic, and yours too, you have to lead right now with some pressure. You can't just you have to lead. Because like I said, the pace of change is not equivalent to the pace of change in the outside world, such that this world is losing ground, right? The attrition to any kind of alternative, the absenteeism rates are out the roof, everybody needs a hug, right? So leading is really hardcore leading and not letting. So before I move on from you, what do you have to say to that?
I agree.
Yay!
No, I mean,
you're not gonna kick me out after.
No, I mean leadership during this time in terms of when there are a lot of pressures to move things faster.
Yeah.
I have a small team that does a lot. I mean, the district, we have over 160,000 students, more than 200 schools, right? And the expectations of sharing what's working and what's not, people want it faster. And so how do we support? And kind of what we heard earlier from TJ and Dr. Jones really connects in terms of how are you praising and giving praise and supporting your team that you're leading, because that's the only way the work is going to happen is if they understand their value too and what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like we're in the middle of a war. You got to lead. You got to run. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. Dr. Bostic, what do you think?
Oh man, it's just having my wheels turning. One of the questions that come to mind is something like this: is this system and process protocol already in place in other countries? When you think about education, I always had a desire to like study abroad or work abroad, and that's one thing I'm taking away from today to start doing some research on. What is currently happening in other countries? Is this process of system available? Another action item that I'm taking from the table is how do we start to collaborate with MSDE for the educators here in Maryland to think about how do we do some focus groups? I know we were having our private conversation during lunch, but operationalize some focus groups to ensure that we collect some data to understand how this could be possible, how much funding will it take? Because every school is not a Title I school. So, some schools will have to use their operational budget, which may not be possible. So we don't want things like budget or people or, ideologies to stop us or be a barrier to this being a possibility. So
Yeah. But you have a really high willingness, which I was excited to see. That's really great. All right, so, Jim.
So there's a moving factor in education, and I think sometimes we overlook it, which is the quantity of human knowledge has exponentially increased. And so if you think back to the earliest days before the written word, the human knowledge was based on how much I could transfer through speaking. Right? So then we were able to write things down and we were able to track more knowledge. We're at a point now where we have exponentially increased the amount of knowledge we actually have, but we have the same amount of time in the day, we have the same number of days in the year to transfer knowledge to students and help them to gain that knowledge. And we've exceeded the capacity that we have to directly transition. So that's where we start talking about like information literacy skills. How do I find my own information, and how we can affect tools to gain that information. That's where AI really comes in as a conversation of the next adoption. That because it's an ingestion of information. It's a distillation of information. It's not a font of wisdom. So teaching students how to use these tools so that they can then become their own self-paced learner when they need to, that just-in-time learning idea. But I think sometimes we do overlook in education that it's not a static amount of information we're transferring from educator to student. I would argue that my students, and I'll use Algebra 1 as a great example. I took Algebra 1 as a sophomore in high school. It's presented now in 7th grade.
Yep.
That is a transition of knowledge. And the reason it's been pushed down in the grades is because it needs to make room for advanced mathematics at the end. So my expectation is if I had gotten to calculus as a high school student, I would have been an advanced student. Now it's almost a basic expectation for students that are college ready that they'll hit calculus. And so just by seeing that in the last 35 years, we're working to transfer knowledge in a different way. And the only way to do that is to have students have their own tool set that they can take advantage of these new force multiplying technological initiatives like AI, like advanced searching. And I would just point out that Dr. Addison's point about turning data back, actionable data. There's no longer the ability to just hand a report to a teacher and say, here's where your class was in 6 months ago. That's forensic data. We're not working on lag data anymore. We're looking on lead data.
Well, the legislators still are.
Yeah.
The DOE still are. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so any other questions, guys? What do you want to know? Chief, share a question.
So we all agree that
Hold on, we need to hand her a mic so we can hear it on the camera.
we all agree that this is coming. This is coming. We're going to embrace it, be afraid of it, whatever, but we know it's coming. But we also seem to all agree that the humanness needs to be a part of this.
Yes.
And a better, more precise human. Okay, like using the,
What do you mean by that?
I think using the humans for what is human.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like,
that's
why are they
exactly my question.
answering so many
Is
emails?
precise the right word?
Yeah, precision use. Like, they're doing a lot of things that they don't need to be doing.
Okay, so that's my
I mean,
question.
I think
Efficiency.
AI can handle the precision and
Well-
humans can handle the breadth and depth.
The hugging,
So,
yeah.
well, so I think to the exact point, when I, using my own educational experience, I had to learn the times tables. I had to sit down and spend an appreciable amount of my 3rd grade year learning times tables. I would defy anyone right now to not be able to pull a calculator. And so the idea of why math works versus the rote and repetitive. And so that knowledge transfer about why is it important, how does the process work, that's where the teacher comes in. The rote and repetitive skills that the AI can take over, but that AI is not going to predict what that kid needs the next step. It'll do a good job at kind of faking that. Like it'll ramp up the rigor, it'll provide more information, whatever. But a teacher looking at the whole child, that's where the humanity of this comes in. I may have something that presents as a problem in science. Okay, I'm not gaining that science knowledge that I need. AI is doing a fine job presenting it to me, whatever. The teacher is the one that looks over the child's shoulder and says, oh, so you have a reading processing issue that we have to address because that's what's keeping you from there. That's where that real decision making. We're never going to divorce the public education system, private education system, anybody away from a person speaking to another person. It is baked into our DNA that that's how education occurs. And so,
that's, everybody's touching on a question. Let's define what unique characteristics we see as the human aspect of what we want in education and the technology aspect of what we want and need in education. So what are those, when I heard you talking about that student, we went to their home, that's a very human thing to do. When we're looking at the data, we could put it on a spreadsheet and use that technology to see what the humanness is. So what I want to hear from you guys is, what is the human aspect that is unique to the human aspect that we need in education, and what is the technology aspect that we can leverage and use?
We could spend days on this, right?
Yeah.
Let's just do pithy remarks for now. But yes.
I mean, like, just because this is all encompassing, but like, I feel like we woke up January 1st this year, and all of a sudden it was AI
Everywhere.
Like Christmas, it was like analog everything. And all of a sudden we woke up like, AI is here and get on board. And like
Subliminal messages and all the advertising.
everything. And so from an education standpoint, especially public school districts, there was an enormous learning curve. I remember I was at ISTE in Philadelphia a couple of years ago, just 2 years ago, and the AI booths there were ginormous and like everything. And I said, how are you guys?
I just want to remind you though, the AI that's being talked about, and
Generative.
then we want to go back to her question, is really consumer souped up search engine AI. That's what generative AI is.
Right.
And quite literally, as a software developer, it's a distraction. It's not really what AI is going to do.
But
AI
But
with
it's-
recommendations engine, with deep learning, all the other things that it can do, the 9 types of AIs we talked about today, when these all converge, it's a game changer in every direction. It is not just generative AI.
right.
That's a
and,
distraction.
And educating the educational community about all of this stuff is going to be a process.
They
of
are
how
going to be
fast it's gonna
distracted into that and not realize they just put down a side road,
And so there's a
is my concern from a
Yeah.
leadership perspective. Does that make sense? Don't go down the side road only, is my word, right? So let's go back to the human question.
So, apologize for jumping in, but I'll tell you, again, I only speak in anecdotes. So, I'm an executive director in Baltimore County, okay? I graduated high school with an 890 on the SATs and a 2.5 GPA. I shouldn't have been accepted to college. I was actually accepted out of state because of my tuition, but I shouldn't have been there, okay? But I had teachers around me that didn't see my numbers, they saw me. So when you ask, where does the teacher fit in the classroom? We can put all the data on the spreadsheet you want. We can talk about what the numbers point to, but that human decision to know the human person, that's what your role is as an educator. It's to know the child. It's the relationship. I have a student, I'm going to use his name out loud. His name was Brandon Brown. Taught him in 4th grade, and he had a learning disability in math. He has photography that has been on display in Times Square for Nike ads. And he still speaks to me today because of the connection I made with him as a person as I was working with his education. He attributes his success in part to his 4th grade teacher. That's a lot of years in between when he knew me and when he started doing his thing. And that didn't have anything to do with his data, didn't have anything to do with his numbers, didn't have anything to do with his achievement. It had everything to do with the fact that I saw him as a person and spoke to him as a person and encouraged him to be a person.
I think, and it goes back to kind of what Dr. Bostic talked about earlier in terms of his approach to the students, right? And so going out and seeing that student one-on-one and engaging with them individually so that they know that they are valued. I think that's the piece that AI can't do, right? You can't.
No, because when a machine tells me it likes me, I don't really believe that.
Well, I mean, and it's a machine, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
so
like, I don't
really
really
and
care.
truly, there are no feelings, there's no caring,
Right.
and you don't get anything from that versus a one-on-one conversation. Like you said, people need a hug, can't get a hug from a machine. Well,
In the
robust.
future.
But-
It's not the hug you want.
What do you think about Justin?
Going back to Jim's point, there's data that speaks specifically to the kids' pathway. We think about the blueprint, the Maryland blueprint,
Yeah.
and that pathway. And it says that if a child is not introduced to a person or a certain type of teacher or a certain type of experience by third grade, fourth grade, the odds of them graduating are blink, right? So, there's data around that, and that's a powerful story that you shared. I think with the humanity piece, just going to your question, I think it's going to be important to get teacher feedback, right? A teacher voice to help be a part of this initiative, this committee to say, oh, we see it, but we want to make sure that teachers believe in it too and have some type of voice in the process, or the main office, for example. More recently, we're changing and shifting from a paper payroll system to electronic, right? That's a huge shift for, people that may have been doing it for 20 years, 10 years and so forth. But how do they feel about that, right? And did they have a voice in that? And how does that impact their work? So we just have to be mindful, use mindfulness to ensure that people are on board with what we're trying to do.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So final comments from the three of you. What would you tell the rest of America? What is the priority? What to pay attention to? Kecia, let's have you go first.
Oh,
You love being put on the spot.
yeah, no. So really and truly, as a researcher, right, I would want us to pay attention to what we are learning through evidence from the research around this shift in practice and thinking. Is it really doing what we want it to do? Is it doing what it's intended to do? Or is it doing something else? And we thought it would do one thing, but it's not really doing that. So I would say
You mean technology overall?
technology overall, but particularly educational technology in terms of how right now, sometimes we're saying we need it to do X.
Mm-hmm.
And are we sure we need it to do X? Or, is there an opportunity to, again, create this balance?
Wow, that's extremely astute. Because I would tell you, the research says, well, from a 10,000 foot view, technology has done a lot for specific instances, but on balance, it hasn't actually been enterprise organized well enough to change the structure of education to be more efficient overall. Because the average teacher has, 200 to 300 logins. I mean, Jim's going to talk for an hour now about the organization of IT, right? So really, I think that was very astute. Thank you very much. I hope America hears that.
Yeah.
All right, so Jim, I'm going to let you go now because you're going to let it rip, but let's be brief.
So first of all, our teachers have one login, and we've done single sign-in. So yeah, they have single sign-on, so they just show up. But I think that it's always important to remember technology is that tool, okay? And that tool has to be used for its intention. Sometimes I feel like we're looking for a silver bullet or a panacea. It's going to fix everything. Technology is not the solve for everything. It doesn't remove the human factor. I apologize for not remembering his name, but the new CEO of One Ed Tech spoke recently about AI and doctors, where doctors have started to use AI to listen to patients and write their thing.
Transcript.
Yeah, their transcript. And his comment was this, that the research shows that doctors are spending 2 hours after work writing up all of their transcripts. But the doctors, after using AI, spent 2 hours writing their transcript. So they didn't lose any hours out of the day. But they found that the mental load that they were under went down because they weren't writing from scratch. They were revising what the AI had said.
That's what the lawyers say.
Yeah, and he also pointed to the fact that when they spoke to the patients, they felt that the AIs written were more empathetic than what the doctors had written, because and it became more verbose and it had more lines in it. And so, I think that the counsel that every educator in the country needs to hear is, AI is just the newest thing to show up in an ever-changing environment that we have proof and practice on ingestion. So when the internet showed up, we ingested it into education and we incorporated it into the fabric. AI is here and we're We're working to incorporate it. We'll incorporate it into the fabric, and the next thing will come, and the next thing will come, and the next thing will come. And we will continue to have teachers standing in front of students.
All
Continue.
right, so that was great, Jim. You're the wrap-up batter, Dr. Bostic.
Oh, nice.
You have a swing at it.
Yeah.
All right,
Let's do
so
it.
my summary or takeaway is theory versus practice. I've been thinking about this all day, and I think back to my engineering experience of being an undergrad. I never knew or heard about that we had an undergrad research experience. I engaged in that experience, thinking about the human piece. I formed a relationship, engaged in it. I had the opportunity to create this mad scientist design of a doorbell sensor, front doorbell sensor for people who could not see or hear, like impaired people that may be living by themselves. I say that to say that's very relatable to my senior class experience where I created a theory and I said, hey, this could work, but in practice, does it work, right? So we have to be careful, as we heard just now, to ensure that the things that we're theoretically creating, I think we're on the ground level of AI. It's actually going to work in practice for what we're trying to do, because it's definitely a difference with the research happening first, theory, then practice.
All right, well, that was awesome. Thank you three very, very much.
Okay.